Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Check Out This Record podcast. My name is Frank, and with me is my good buddy, Mark.
Hey, hey, hey!
We're syndicated via Redline Radio LLC out of Cleveland. Mark?
Cleveland
rocks! We're also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Or you can watch us making silly faces at each other over on YouTube.
That's right. So again, welcome. This is a podcast where Mark and I recommend albums to each other and review them. Plus, we have a wide variety of musical discussions like our Spotlight series, where we dig into a band or subgenre and see what comes out the other side.
Yeah, and in our verse series, we'll pit two bands or two albums or whatever two things Frank and I can think to fight over. We'll put them in a squared circle. We'll make them duke it out, and we'll see which one's better. Plus, our 100% guaranteed, completely original top 5, maybe 10 list of what we like is best or think is worst. Top 5 lists are awesome and totally original.
Absolutely. And be sure to check us out on Instagram. We drop additional content on YouTube as well. Hopefully that's going to want you wanting more basically of our random nonsense. If you have a record that you would like us to check out, then drop us a comment wherever you find us. While you're at it, subscribe, give us a review, a rating while you're at it. So I go ahead and say this, Mark, how are you, Broseph?
Feeling good, old buddy. Been rocking out this week.
Yeah.
Ready to talk records. And hey, did you know? Fun fact, Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA was the first CD, that is compact disc, pressed in the United States.
Bruce. That's right. And well, before either of us had any idea what a CD was, CBS actually pressed Born to Run in September of '84 in their brand new Terre Haute, Indiana CD production plant.
I made that sentence so fun for you to read.
Loved it. Loved every second.
Yeah. Who names a town Terre Haute? Anyway, that's right, Frank. Now, Billy Joel fans will be quick to mention that his album 52nd Street was pressed in Japan back in 1982 and was the first compact disc ever pressed. But you know what, Frank?
What's that, Mark?
Fuck Billy Joel.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree. So here at Check Out This Record, we're big advocates of a personal record collection. We don't believe that there should be any hard set rules about how one should build their record collection, but we thought as collectors, we'd like to share some tips for folks who are interested in getting their collection started or just want to build on what they already have. That said, Mark, you have your first hard set rule about building your record collection.
Yeah, first rule, don't be too cool. We've all been there. Listen, you go to the record store, the cashier greets you on the way in, or you strike up a conversation when you can't find what you're looking for, and he's like, hey, some dude died, and we got a bunch of mint Captain Beefheart records in, if you're missing any. And you're like, nah, man, I've got everything old Beefers ever did, right? I'm set. Look, I get it, right? Captain isn't for everyone. Right, Frank, you agree? Captain's not for everyone?
I agree. The Captain is not for everyone, no.
You know? But do you even know who he is? Have you even heard of such a dumb band name in your whole life? No, you haven't. But don't be too cool. Just own it.
Own it.
The record store dude or dudette will forever know more bands than you, okay? And if you tell them you don't know something, they might get a little snarky, but chances are they're going to pick out whatever they thought Captain Beefheart's best record was and put it on for you. And who knows, maybe you fall deeply in love with Captain Beefheart. Maybe you go, I've had enough Captain Beefhearts, and he's vastly overrated compared to the influence his catalog has already had.
Absolutely. And how do you not say Captain Beefheart without saying Captain Beeffarts, my friend?
Right. I know. I was sitting on it for so long, and I like calling them old beefers too.
Beefer's fun. It's fun to say. It just
Yeah.
the way the mouth moves to pronounce that. I dig that. But
Beefer.
beefer. But right on, Mark, with old beefer. In fact, on a side note, he has influenced one of my favorites, Mr. Tom Waits.
Yeah.
So that is something to note about the old beefer. But another thing to do is to be open about picking something based on an album cover. Sometimes I'll see records. There'll be recommendations based on the artist you like. Don't be afraid to try those out. If done right, the album cover can totally and actually should properly reflect what the album is about as far as the mood and the music. There's a thrill, if there is a thrill, if one finds a thrill in finding new music, it's that discovery, and there's no better way to do that than maybe glossing through and seeing an album cover and hear some recommendations based on that and be like, okay, I'm going to give that a try. And if you see something they don't have on a side note, ask them to order it. It helps their business. And also check out their review section. You can probably find some good gems in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't be afraid to take a book for its cover, or in this case, a record. It's going to work. I like where your head's at, Frank.
Thanks, man. I like where it's at too. Thank you. Now here's a term, Mark. I'm going to say this term, and it's fascinating when I say it, and we're going to start talking about it. But the term is new metal.
New metal.
New metal, absolutely.
Like you're a cow. New metal.
That's right. That's right. It's a fascinating term. It describes such a subgenre of music, but what on earth does it mean? I mean, listen, I've heard of alternative metal, rap rock, funk metal. Prior to that, in the late 90s, this is when this term was being thrown around. But let's talk about new metal because it reflects the band that we're highlighting in the album we're highlighting today. Mark, when did you first hear of this term new metal?
I have no idea. I remember pretty clearly the mainstream musical tide shifting in the late 90s. Nirvana had destroyed hair metal and led us into the popularity of punk rock, which was really in its third wave. It's a whole other conversation we can be more than happy to get into with you guys, which made way for more commercially successful alt rock / alt metal, and kind of new metal trickled its way into the zeitgeist somehow. Somewhere around 97, it's where I feel like it kind of caught mainstream footing.
Yeah,
I guess it's probably the best way to try to figure out this bizarre subgenre. But it's kind of an odd way to lump a lot of different sounds together, especially a lot of new stuff that people didn't know how to categorize yet. So new metal as a genre, or at least the name of the genre, seems to appear after most of the bands related to it were really all pretty well established.
Yeah, and in research it seems that our favorite, Korn, was perhaps slapped with this term back in '93, but new metal seems to be a conglomeration of metal, grunge, hip hop, alternative rock on the first layer, and by the time we get to that second layer of the old onion, there's elements of funk, electronic music, punk, new wave, jazz, post-punk, traditional rap, and way more. I mean, could they just coin it as alternative, you would think, right? Why slap a new term under it? I wonder if that's because most bands in Spotlight had metal roots, I'm thinking.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. Well, clearly being a hybrid genre, right? Like we're taking a lot of different things and slamming them in some cases together. It feels safest to say the bulk of the DNA that makes up new metal is going to be heavy metal-ish in one form or another, a good portion of rap or hip-hop, with occasionally some rapping in it. Some bands obviously leaning heavier on that, particularly, your Limp Bizkits with their cookies and shit. Let's get kind of right to it for a bit.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us what the band we're doing tonight is, and where kind of that instrumental sound of new metal kind of comes from? What's bringing that together?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we're going to be talking about the Deftones. And one thing that has a commonality with the new metal, well, on the instrumentation side, and particularly on the guitar, is are riffs as opposed to solos. So really, they eliminate the guitar solos, right? A lot of the bands tune down and have an emphasis on rhythm guitar, which is where maybe that groove aspect comes in. The bass is influenced by funk and hip hop, which explains the slapping probably. Now, boring nerd alert here, Mark. I know, right? But the note structure is typically based on the Dorian and Phrygian modes, which I'm actually learning about in my lesson. So big thanks to Yoel out there, who has been an awesome teacher. Thank you, my friend. Much appreciated.
What, so that Yoel gets some credit here, what are the Dorian and Phrygian modes?
The Dorian and the Phrygian modes? Well, I have it right here on this handy paper. Exactly what they are.
Is this like a note structure? Is this, is it a tempo thing?
Yeah,
it looks like that.
Right. So modes are basically scales, but it's not. There's more detail to them. It's another way to say them in Dorian and Phrygian. They're all, I think, Greek-rooted words to represent the scales, and those two in particular are minor scales. So they're big scales, but they are in succession of each other. So it seems to me that from my research in new metal, they're going back and forth between these two modes in particular. Okay.
Oh, very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
There is a common thread with the drummers here too. Whereas in the 70s and 80s, metal drummers in particular went for like just really big and booming drums that rang out. Oftentimes you'd see drummers with the bass drum head almost completely cut off, and then muffled with pillows and stuff, and then mic'd differently to create the biggest open kind of booming sound, the largest sound. Whereas with new metal and heavy metal, as we progressed into the 90s and 2000s, we get this really tight, really higher pitched tone. A lot of the drummers would use what's called a piccolo snare, which is a much thinner snare drum to create less reverberation and to get that. Now, there's a bit of a balance because they do like the big bass drums for the big boom, but they're not quite as intentionally packed in, and they're just using them for the big boom with the really tight snare sound and lots of big crashing cymbals. So you really get this tight, high-pitched snare hit, which kind of resonates kind of through the genre, but really kind of a lot of music in this era that wasn't specific to it wasn't punk rock. It wasn't folk music. It was the drums had this very similar pattern.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that too on a side note, because when I would look at performances of these bands, I noticed that there was a similar formula that they were following. The drummers are that is, and I didn't know exactly what that was all about, and then you just answered that question. So thank you for doing that. So here's some new metal ancestors, and let's chat a minute about them. Some include Faith No More, Primus, Red Hot Chili Peppers, White Zombie, Rage Against the Machine, Infectious Grooves, Fishbone, Machine Head, Sepultura, Slayer, Pantera. Mark, your thoughts?
It's really interesting the spread across rock and roll and the heavy metal spectrum that new metal gets to kind of call its roots. Right? It's really interesting when you look at these bands. You get like the Red Hot Chili Peppers, who for rock and roll purposes are on the kind of conservative side of the soundscape, right?
Yeah.
But they do bring in a little bit of that funk. Well, Primus pushes the envelope on redefining what the instruments could be used for. We see a lot of bass leads. We hear a lot of basses carrying melodies, while the guitars are kind of doing distorted sounds, kind of across the genre. That happens quite a bit, which is cool. It allows it to open up. Infectious Groove and Fishbone bring a lot of that kind of 70s band-driven funk and soul, which is really cool. And you can hear that in these. Infectious Grooves is super underrated, and if you're not aware of who they are, go pick up a Suicidal Tendencies record and an Infectious Groove record. I just have a great time.
Yeah.
I gotta tell you though,
good call now.
Rage Against the Machine, I think they're new metal.
Yeah.
Now, I think the obvious political nature of the band,
totally,
and the fact that he's almost outright rapping 90% of the time, probably more than he's singing. I don't know. Maybe that's not right. That might not be right. I see them as a new metal band. They really hit the formula, with the exception that they were really kind of the only blatantly political band of the subgenre. But and it's interesting because they rose and fell in the same period as that kind of classic group of new metal. We're talking 93, 4, 5, and done by 2002. That's like the exact Rage Against.
Yeah, you're right.
Birth. So it really kind of interesting how they fit the bill, but all in kind of separate ways. And then you get some of the more metal bands, the Pantera, the Sepultura, that did impart some of that big heaviness, and that comes across in the drums and a lot of the guitars. And you'll hear me struggle to describe guitar tones later.
but again, it's just fascinating of all the bands we mentioned too. And the other day, a Primus song came on satellite radio. It was either Tommy the Cat. Yeah, it was that one, or I think it was Tommy the Cat actually.
Okay.
But I was trying to think of how to describe it to my daughters. I'm like, I'm not going to even try to explain what a band like Primus is. It's I can't explain them to you. I'm sorry.
Hey, when you're 17 and you find pot, ask Uncle Mark.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. I'll give you Mark's number and you can call him. So the band we're highlighting in this episode came out during the inception of that phrase, new metal, and that band, as I alluded to earlier, is the Deftones, and they're hailing from Sacramento, California. They actually formed in 1988. Formed was 93 for the record. Yeah, so I first heard them during the time of the album that we'll be discussing, and that's their second release, Around the Fur. I don't recall if it was My Own Summer, Shove It, or Be Quiet and Drive Far Away was the track, but that was my earliest memories of the band. Mark, your memories of hearing the Deftones?
Well, let's just hold up for a second on the Korn hate.
I know.
If you wanted to do a verse here of Korn versus Deftones, we could have done that.
I know.
But
I'm secretly trying to get that in there.
That said, I remember people in high school really being into the band and this record in particular. But I didn't care. There was just enough cool shit that wasn't this. There was enough kind of dirtier, grimier stuff that was a little more attractive to me at the time. So I kind of openly passed on it, even though I was probably one of the few people who didn't have this in their record collection at the time, or their CD case, as the time worked. So, for transparency, whatever that's worth, it's just a stupid show about me and Frank talking shit about records. Frank or I will suggest a record for the other one, but because the Deftones has come up so much, and because I have actively passed on it so much, I asked Frank. Frank, will you recommend a record for me of the Deftones? And this is it. And we're gonna get into this. And
yeah, absolutely. And my oldest,
take it away, buddy. Now that I've just kind of meandered and said uhs and ahs a lot.
It's okay. And my oldest just peeked her head in here. Anyway, I was super amped to see the Deftones at Ozfest '99, and that was because all of these bands that were in the spotlight were going to be there. But I also felt that they were different. Lead singer Chino Moreno states that he didn't grow up a metal fan. He was actually into bands such as Depeche Mode and Cure and Bad Brains, and people like Prince influenced him. It wasn't until the guitarist Stephen Carpenter introduced him to metal, and that's why maybe I think they were trying to shake that new metal label. Their sound is also an assortment for me, but personally, I happen to connect to that particular assortment. Mark?
Yeah, they definitely have a signature sound, but like I said, it was never one because obviously they had two singles that neither one of them was a particular huge hit, but they were staples on MTV, and part of the the growing movement on MTV to kind of felt like to try to combat some of the pop stuff that was coming out, but it just never caught me.
Yeah. Now, I love the way Chino basically sings in a variety of different styles. He sings regularly, he whispers, he screams, he even raps. There's huge melody in their songs and creates, again, this atmospheric at- atmosphere. Look at me, right? Which other bands in this genre really didn't display. Lyrically, I think it's more extensive and ambiguous, which leaves it up to the listener, which I always love, Mark.
Yeah, I was really surprised at what he does lyrically. It's better than it seems on the surface. And whether they like it or not, I think it's probably the best within the genre, in terms of, kind of cool lyrics and phrasing.
Yeah. And Moreno stated in interviews that he wanted to stay away from that label of new metal. He didn't like it, didn't want to be associated with it. He even declined going on tour with Korn when asked. He even states how they turned down the opportunity to do MTV Spring Break. That spot was then taken by Limp Bizkit, and I remember this performance as it was their first performance on TV of everyone's favorite song, Nookie. So even though it seemed that Limp Bizkit's success was inevitable, and I'm joking here, there may be partial blame on Chino for their success.
Full
Um,
blame. Full
I
blame.
know. Now, we talked offline, Mark, about that separation, and you asked me a great question, and you said, because I said, I think Deftones try to separate themselves, and you said, well, couldn't you say that for a band like Incubus? And yeah, absolutely you can, and then it just comes, I think, to a matter of personal taste, and what you like, you know?
Yeah, it's really a bizarre genre. And we probably could spend a lot more time in kind of the glory days of it. And we could certainly spend time on the new metal, the people who actually want to be called new metal.
New
But I
metal.
don't hate myself that much. So I'm going to veto that idea right now. Tell
There
me,
you go.
tell me more about the Deftones. Really, come
Yeah.
on,
Okay. I'm
get
gonna
me
give it
wet.
to you. All right. You ready? You ready? So in '95, the Deftones released their first album, Adrenaline, which I happen to like a lot. Songs like Bored, Minus Blindfold. Minus Blindfold, by the way, is my favorite Deftones song. Seven Words and Engine Number 9. I went back and re-listened to them. I really dug them. Then we get to this album that we're going to look at, Around the Fur. It was released on October 28th, 1997 on Maverick Records. We get 10 tracks here, the two big singles being My Own Summer and Be Quiet and Drive. So how does this hold up, Mark? Was this better than you expected, or revisiting this in a little bit more detail? What was your thoughts here?
It was better than I expected, for sure. I was surprised. I thought outside of the two singles, I would get pretty bored or kind of screaming at my phone about how dumb it was. It does have some low points, and we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
But that first listen, I have to admit, I think I misjudged this band.
Well, and this is why we do this, right? So here we go, around the fur, track by track review. Mark's going to take us away with the first song.
Yeah, My Own Summer, parentheses, shove it. Should have put those parentheses on more songs, man.
I know.
They seem to do well with us. Anyways, very cool way to open an album. That this big build up from just a little tom and snare hit, and then you get into this kind of like, this is where I'm going to have a problem with the guitars, Frank, and you can help me out.
Yeah.
It's kind of like this whirling, palm muted, distorted guitar tone. It keeps an even pace, which is cool. I don't know how to describe it. It's very distinctively their sound.
Yeah.
But it builds into this even bigger chorus, and I really dug it. Lyrically, it's interesting. I like this line. I think God is moving its tongue. There's no crowd in the streets and no sun in my own summer. I'm intrigued. I think this is a great way to start the record. I think it really throws a question on whatever you think this song is about.
Right.
You're probably wrong, because it's got this almost spiritual conversation going on. It's, empty streets, my own summer, making something yourself. Really, I was really impressed at his ability to make me go like, what the fuck? What is my own summer? What is my own summer?
Right. What does
What's
that mean
my own
exactly?
summer?
What does that mean, right? Like
Right.
again, that whole interpretation, which is so cool. The guitar from I got the Ibanez very well, Mark. It's
Yeah.
actually sitting right here behind me, the green Ibanez. Um,
It's a green Ibanez.
it is a green Ibanez, by the way. I got an Ibanez because of uh, kind of this style of music at the time, because I bought it in the late '90s, and I know that's kind of what these bands were using. I think a lot of that guitar tone has to do with that, but they did do something, and I don't know if it was with the pedals. They're definitely tuning down also with these songs that
Mhm.
is really making it their own at the end of the day, and it becomes a signature. Definitely a signature sound with the band, I think they're also using certain amps to get that. I think orange amps might be the ones that they use. There's probably a lot of other things that are going on, but it's definitely that Ibanez sound. I think that gives it this kind of heavy, this heavy kind of almost gritty feel, but it does leave it a little airy too. But as far as this track goes, opening track, I think it's probably regarded as one of their most popular, and rightfully so. The guitar
Mhm.
riff, the whispering vocals on the verses, the build up, then the scream, the shove it. I like that. I like the lyrics. Hey, you big star, tell me when it's over. Hey, you big mood, guide me to shelter, cause I'm through. And the 2 hits the 6, and it's summer again. I don't think that we get this type of death in these other bands with this other stuff around this time, and summer again to some can mean so much, a period of isolation, what happens when we left to our own devices. So who knows what could happen. I'm not saying this is what it's about, but the imagery is definitely there.
Yeah.
We then moved to track 2, Labia, which I always loved the song, and I thought was one of the better Deftones songs.
Can I tell you
And
something?
yes, sir.
I had no idea that's how you spell labia.
I knew
I
there
was
was
so
this.
happy you were going to be the first one to do this, because I was like, I'm not sure that I know what that word is, and I'm too lazy to look it up, even though the internet is literally in my hand.
I hope that's how it's pronounced. But this was another track that I really fell in love with in that same Green Ibanez. I I bought that and I started learning this song early on, and I think it's a really good track. I think the guitar in this is really done well. There's a great riff. There's the whispered lyrics. I love the dying of boredom. I'll try it all. I love that chorus. The buttercup that he mentions. The title of the songs, obviously, it could lead to the direction of someone he's courting, and the looks and feels great. Obviously, it could have some sexual connotation there, and I think the screams are well placed here. So for me personally, this was a strong track. What do you think about this song, Mark?
This song really kind of feels a little too two-dimensional to me. It kind of
Hmm.
feels like there's flipping a light switch between heavy and light mode, of just like, we're gonna do heavy sound, light sound, heavy sound, light sound,
Mm,
and it didn't really connect to me the way the last song really showed them being able to be a little bit more musically versatile. I felt like this was a really kind of condensed representation of their abilities.
got it.
And the singing on this one kind of threw me off a little bit. He sounds kind of like a goblin a little bit in some part. Um,
I like that.
and I know it's supposed to just be kind of creepy, but it just distracts from the lyrics. And I agree with you. Some of the lyrics are really cool, really interesting lyrics, but it takes away from it. And there's a few times in this record where he's doing this low, whispery
Yes,
sing talk thing, where you, even reading the lyrics along with it, you can barely understand what he's
I
saying.
agree. I agree.
And it takes away from me. But it hasn't taken me out of it. I'm still riding pretty high. When we get to Mascara,
Yeah.
I really like the single guitar notes intro. Really just kind of a cool little pattern, especially for an album where there's no discernible guitar solo.
Yeah.
Really showcasing some of that ability to not just play kind of that grinding palm mute sound. I thought it did a great job of setting up the mood and the vibe. rather than just kind of the last track where it just kind of felt like they kind of just plowed through. It builds to kind of this mid-tempo rock, which really they don't ever go too fast, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And I think that might be maybe something newer where the bands are going a little bit faster. But these guys really can do that mid-tempo groove really quite well. I love the way he's able to pace his lyrics here. Really filling the sound that's left by some of the single guitar notes. I thought it was really interesting the way they did that. There is a hint of that kind of goblin voice coming back.
Yeah, a little bit.
But he does some solid singing in here, and it really works. I like the way he builds to the phrase, excuse me. It's too bad you're married to me.
Yeah,
and
I
then
like
the band takes a heavier, darker tone, and you get kind of that kind of cool creeped out intro. I just really like the way they balanced that. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, and this song hints to me that early on the band wasn't, again, like the others. It has elements of shoegaze and post-hardcore. I'm hearing some Weezer here and other display of emotions, which really wasn't shown, again, by the contemporaries. There's a drowning, morose style. I think that's something that the band will carry on in their later albums. It's not a bad track. I wouldn't say it's my favorite, but it was definitely one I appreciated revisiting. Then we get to the next track, Around the Fur, and the lyrics caught me right in the beginning when he says, "Hey, vanity, this vial's empty, so are you. Hey, glamorous, this vial's not God anymore." I like the heavy ending with the chorus and the screaming. It's a track I used to skip, and I'm not sure why. It had all the ingredients that made a classic-sounding Deftones song. It's not overly long either, just clocking in at 3 minutes and 32 seconds, so I enjoyed listening to this one again. Mark, what about you, man?
Ooh, the titular title track.
That's right.
Man, there's a lot of him breathing on this record, but especially this track.
Yeah.
Lots of deep breaths. Dig the tight drum intro though. Pretty cool. Lyrically, I dig it, and I think it could be a better known track if they had just used those brackets. And put them on the word speak. I think it would have worked. It fits their pattern, it fits their style, the way they do choruses, and I think it really works. I was surprised that this wasn't a single or a bigger song, because it is actually pretty well structured and put together. I think I would have liked it if it was shorter, like just if I'm kind of being nitpicky.
Sure.
I feel like they pay that DJ, so they got to make sure he does something on this. So we get like this kind of like, I call it a spooky bridge of soul voice.
Nice.
Bridge, that just leads to an extra chorus, whatever. So the heavy breathing and the DJ bridge aside, it's a cool song. Spoiler alert for the end of the record when we get to it, this thing could have been a lot shorter.
Yeah, especially at the end.
Yeah, especially at the end. Well, take out the 35 whatever it is minutes of dead air at the end for the secret track that doesn't need to exist. But just a lot of these songs get a little repetitious, and this was me really first noticing it, that these songs stretch into like the 4, 5, and 6 minute mark almost for no reason.
Right.
So anyways, the next song is called Rickets. So this song makes me kind of nuts, but I kind of like it. He blends that goblin voice, which I hate, with his like really low growl voice, which I really dig.
Right.
And it's a bummer because I like his lyrics more than I want to admit. I do. I like them. Most of them, on the surface come off as nonsense, but they really work to build. They really work to build an experience for the listener to place their own meaning within these songs and build their own relationship to them. I really like the way he builds that, except for with the creepy whisper thing. It's a wet blanket on all the cool shit that's been going on in the rest of the song. It's just this thing of like, hearing somebody whispering through the walls. It's not creepy. It's just annoying, and that's how that comes across for me kind of anytime it happens on this record.
Yeah, this song kind of drove me nuts too a little bit, and I think it's also what we were hearing maybe from those new metal bands at the time. You had the loud, heavy riffs, the screaming vocals. There's definitely that punch in the face aspect to it musically. I'm not saying it's one of my favorites. Probably it's more on the least favorite tier on the album. The repetition of the lyrics, I agree with you, those kind of get to me as well. So it's just okay. But yeah, it's kind of one of those songs that gives you that internal struggle because it will drive you a little crazy. Then we get to Be Quiet and Drive, far away, brackets far away. So another one of their more popular tracks. It surprised me how much this did hold up after all these years. I liked it then. I really like it now. I think it's heavy in the shoegaze style. I remember back in the day listening to it very loudly while driving far, and today, you know, I would want to get in the car and actually now drive far away. So, I like the I don't care where, just far. The opening line, this town don't feel mine. I'm so fast to get away. Far can be more relevant again. I think it's against the grain from the typical formula. And this is another track that I don't personally think the other bands could be pulling off. It's not overly complicated, but it's deep and it's vast, I think, in meaning. I don't know why they're wanting to get away. That is the person in this song, but to me, it's cool. Again, in other bands, I knew what they were saying. You read the Korn and the Godsmack lyrics, especially Godsmack lyrics, you know exactly what's going on. It's not hard to figure out. Here, there's a lot left up to the imagination, and I personally like that. So, Mark, what'd you think about the song?
I liked the bright guitars. I felt that they're not as heavy. They really did a great job of kind of lightening the sound. This may be a case. This feels like somebody went, hey, what if we made something kind of more radio friendly?
Yeah.
But it totally works. It's got a good steady groove through it. It's probably one of my favorite vocal performances from Chino.
Yeah.
I kind of love how he takes his time with every word in this song. It's a cool song. Yeah. There's a guitar or record scratch thing towards the end that does nothing for the song, but tack on a bridge that leads to another chorus, and that's nice. But literally, you don't need the DJ; just fire him,
get him out.
Yeah, because it didn't add anything to the song, and it was just like hey, look, we're paying him. He needs 40 seconds at the end of this song to bore Mark to death with. So the next song is Lotion. All the cool stuff, Be Quiet and Drive Away just did. You ruined it. I liked that they put a song with a different structure here, but this song feels disjointed and manic. That it just pales in comparison to the previous track and really the rest of the record. I think this is probably my least favorite song. Even with its pretty standard genre chorus, it just didn't. It didn't fit with the rest of it. If I were cutting a track from this album, it's this one. It's also the first time any kind of attempt at rapping happens.
Yes.
With the way he delivers his lyrics, it just didn't work. He's got a very specific singing style, and when he tries to rap, it doesn't work.
It doesn't work for you. Yeah, to me, this was an interesting one because it was another. I thought it was a great screaming performance from him, and it brings us back to this melodic chorus, and it's filled with all these other influences, not just metal. It's another song, though. Back in the day, I would gloss over for some reason. We get a wide variety again of vocal styles. Again, the rapping, the singing, the screaming. I do appreciate though the construction of the songs of a song like this. I know I always say it, but it's hard. I wouldn't know where to start creating it, and maybe that's where my head is a lot of times when listening to these things. I think the guitar tone is nice and sharp. The song though, it did creep up on me in a way where I was like, oh, okay, maybe. When I was 17, I should have respected the concept of an album work, because here we are, in our almost late 30s, almost 40s, and talking about obviously albums as a whole. So here I am at at 17. I should be waving my finger to my 17-year-old self, saying, "Listen, you got to respect the concept of an album and listen to it fully through." But that it was an interesting track, and then you get Dial the Flu. It's fitting for COVID and quarantine, right? Dial the Flu. To me, this is like an alternative rock kind of grungy tune here. I'm hearing some Only in Dreams from Weezer's Blue Album on the verses and the melody. I think it's a good song. I really don't have anything else much to say about it other than I like it. What about you as far as Dial the Flu?
I didn't hear any Weezer in any of this, so I'm not saying it's not there. I didn't hear it. I have to say I really appreciate the way they can shift gears through the album. They do, with the exception of the song above. I really feel like they're able to transition from one song to another, typically with just a breath, and then right into it, and it really works for them. This song is, however, where I realized maybe he can't sing more than 2 or 3 syllables at a time, like the way he phrases.
Yeah.
To save his life, because whenever he tries to get into more than a few syllables in a short period of time, it doesn't quite work. Musically, it's pretty standard for the band, and it works. It sounds good. I like the guitar reverb effect in place of the solo.
Yep.
I really felt like they could have done a solo there, but they chose this kind of cool effect with the pedal where probably he didn't have a good solo, and I really thought that was a smart choice if he couldn't do that. Cool. And I don't know that he couldn't do that, but that was a choice they made, and it works for the song. So the next track is called Head Up.
Head Up.
And I was worried that the Tasmanian Devil wouldn't be on this album. I'm not going to buzz balls too much on this song, as it's about a friend he lost and was a collaboration with a dude from Soulfly who was related to the friend.
Yeah.
He sings the chorus. He's the one I was teasing about sounding like the Tasmanian.
Yeah, I got it.
Good old Taz. It's a cool enough riff. The chorus is. I know that they really wanted it to be heartfelt, but it's really kind of generic WWE intro, and it's one of the low points of the record. I'm really trying not to bust their balls. Listen, you don't need this DJ. Bring in another goddamn bridge in.
There you go.
That shit stinks. Throw them out. It's over 6 minutes. It's just too long.
Yeah.
I know it's about your dead friend, but oh my God. Anyways, the DJ sucks. Throw that guy out. I'm trying not to make fun of this guy for this song.
Well, funny story with this song is I was at a party back in the old high school days, and there was this guy I knew who played bass. It wasn't John, our first bass player, Mark. It wasn't him.
Okay.
He loved the Deftones and he loved this song, and his band had no singer, and he asked me to try to learn this song that I could sing with his band, and I gave it a listen, and I said to myself, how on earth, I said, would I ever perform this live? Not saying that this is a studio song, but I don't see how a song like this could be duplicated. I think it's a powerful track. I think where it gets people is that beginning part that just got back from the forefront. I like that part. There is a standard, though. There is a generic guitar riff going on here, and definitely 6 minutes is not needed in that song. We get the appearance from Max Cavalera of Soulfly. I'm gonna get heat, but I don't know anything about Soulfly. Maybe in the future we do an album of theirs.
Offshoot of Sepultura.
There you go. There you go. I do think though there is some strong elements to this track. I think it's that opening. I think that opening you want to play loud. Again, the duration of the track is actually longer than the song, and we get a few minutes of experimental jamming here.
The DJ.
There you go, and the DJ, and of course I'll take that. We get MX, which is the final song. It's another song I would gloss over back in the day, but listening to it again, definitely there's some emotions here. I'd like to know who the girl is though in the verses, because I don't see anything about her. You get the classic riffs, which can make it sound like the other tunes. I'm not really fond of the vocals where it's sounding like he's gargling salt water. I don't like that. I think he could do so many different things vocally. Now, if you're listening to this on the old compact disc, Mark, and you let this run, you get some bonus tracks here.
Ew.
Yeah, you have to let it run though quite a while, quite a ways.
35 fucking minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Damone is the name of the track, and it's okay. It sounds like the other stuff on the album. I could take it or leave it, Mark. So MX, the final song on here.
Yeah, I can see why you would have glossed over this. The verse with the girl, it commenting back in real time as he sings, worked.
Yeah.
The rest of the song just feels a little clunky around it. I disagree with you though. I like not knowing who she is. I like that you're just kind of getting this, just hearing enough of one side of a phone call and kind of catching that. I thought it worked for the vibe of it.
Kind of like a mystery almost.
Yeah. I mean, oh, who the fuck is he talking to? Like, oh, fuck, I heard kind of getting just enough of what she's saying. So that was cool. As far as the hidden track, what's with the hidden track? Why?
Yeah.
Look, as far as I'm concerned, the track works. It's pretty decent. In fact, I would have included this in the main listing of the albums. I think it really works. The lyrics are well done. The song itself isn't overly long. It's actually really well paced.
Right.
The only issue with it is that there's like 30 minutes of nothing between the end of MX and this. So it's a little unnecessary. It's not like you were kind of, hiding a Misfits cover. It's not like you were doing an acoustic version of something we heard earlier or something from a previous record.
Yeah.
I'm sure that, whoever Damone is and whatever he means to the band was something special and they put it there. It just didn't come off that way. It just felt like, oh, wait a minute. We were burning the CD for you and we forgot to put a track on. And in real time, this is how this works, but it's not. So here you go.
Yeah. Here you go. It's right here. Wonder if it was about Vic Damone by any chance. That'd be interesting.
Old Vic Damone, yeah. Everybody at home knows who Vic Damone is.
I know. There you go. So, final thoughts. So, Mark, I would tell you for a long time, we know each other a long time, that I'm a big Deftones fan. And I have to be honest, I realized that the records after White Pony, which is the next record after this, I wasn't overly familiar with a lot of it. And my liking originated really from the first two records. Now, when White Pony came out, I didn't love it. But looking back, I could see why they wanted to, again, separate themselves from that new metal stigma. I knew I liked Around the Fur. Did it still hold up? To me, it did. I can see and hear why. To me, they are a band of higher quality out of that bunch of bands that they were lumped into with in the late 90s. For me, the combination of influences, it hits the mark. The new wave, post-punk, dream pop, metal, it's satisfying to me to listen to. Now, in the early 2000s, I believe Chino had a vocal injury occur, which is why if you watch some live performances of these songs recently, the screams aren't all there. And that's okay. A screaming like that, I'm sure, would do that to anybody. I appreciate the singles still, the My Own Summer and Be Quiet and Drive. I personally like those tracks. I am glad they got away from the new metal label and do want to give those other records past White Pony a proper listen, like we have all the time anyway to do so. But you know what I mean. They're definitely on my scope. Mark, your final thoughts on Around the Fur?
Overall, I was pretty pleased with the record. It does a lot of cool stuff, even with me nitpicking about kind of vocal patterns and the fucking goblin voice and the goddamn DJ. Just get rid of the DJ. You don't need them. You're a good enough band without them.
Yeah.
I don't think this will start a new metal renaissance for me personally. I'll be honest, I didn't bother to go ahead and listen to the first album or White Pony or anything else.
Sure.
Because I really wanted to focus on this record and get into it and see what it brought. And I got to tell you, overall, very happy with the experience. I think I definitely did underestimate the Deftones, and particularly this record. That said, new metal renaissance, not for me.
not gonna happen.
Not gonna.
But I am glad though you did like the album
Yeah.
and appreciated it, because I do think they're one of the better bands. So Cool, man. So let's talk about the next episode because we're going to be honest and transparent. We're going to put a little switcheroony, Mark. Yeah, this way and that way. So our next episode was going to be on the new Bob Dylan album, Rough and Rowdy Ways. Here's the thing, though. It's a big album. All Dylan albums are. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of content, and we want some time to listen to that to really give it a nice, thorough listen and have a nice conversation about it. So what we're going to do is we're going to just put the episode we had next after that in place of the Dylan and then kind of do that old switcheroo. So what we're going to talk about, again, we talked about kind of mashup, so to speak. We're taking, we're going to talk ska, and we're going to really highlight some of our favorite records. We're going to pull to each of those from our collection, talk about those, talk about the ska punk genre in general, kind of what it's all about, the feeling, everything that it invokes for us. And I'm excited to talk about that. Mark, what about you?
Yeah, I think we had talked about doing this episode in particular, the ska episode, since we started the show, and I think this is a great time to do it. There's a lot of ska music that is politically aware of itself. It takes a lot of its grassroots from reggae. So I think there'll be some really interesting conversations to be had as to how they relate to now. But there's also some really great pop punk stuff influenced in there, some great some heavier stuff, some dark and metal sounds. There's even some satanic stuff. I don't know that we'll touch that. So that's a confirmation that I won't be picking Mephistopheles. I mean, we could, but how much am I going to really say about the Bumblebee Tuna song?
Yeah, that's true.
So it should be an interesting conversation. It'll be timely, and look. Otherwise, Frank and I would have had 2 days with this Bob Dylan record. We just weren't going to be able to do it justice. So
yeah,
we're going to have a lot of fun doing Ska Week.
We are.
We're not going to tell you what ska records we're going to listen to. We just want you to go out and listen to ska this week. Have a good time. Pick up your feet. Do a little skanking.
Yep.
And thanks for listening.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for listening. If you have a record you want us, again, to listen to or review, let us know. If you're listening to us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or watching our cool faces on YouTube, be sure to subscribe and follow us. You can drop us a line on the old Instagram. Thank you, and be safe out there, everyone.
Bye-bye.